Silverman, who is a professor of health policy and management at the Fairbanks School of Public Health in Indiana. He is a prolific researcher on issues of legal, ethical, and policy issues, and has addressed some pretty interesting topics like vaccination policy in the U.S., shame, stigma, and shared responsibilities. Should childhood vaccination against measles be mandatory requirement, and social distancing in the unvaccinated. I won't go through all the other things, but Ross, over to you.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here today. And as far as hearing from a lawyer, I mean, you had a lot of other options today that you could have chosen, and you chose to be here. So I appreciate that. My expertise, actually, this picks up very nicely from what Nancy was talking about, because my expertise is more in domestic public health law, policy, and ethics, use of state power in order to address vaccination policy. The fact that this is a very political issue, really, it does come down to the local politics of the circumstance. And as a public health lawyer and ethicist, the fact that this is taking place here in Cambridge, about a mile from the Faith Lutheran Church, is for me is a really exciting side note to this whole process. If you go down Broadway towards Central Square, you'll find the church. That's where Henning Jacobson was at the center of the most important case in U.S. public health law, the 1905 Supreme Court case of Jacobson versus Massachusetts, a case about the power of the state to enforce a law requiring the public to get smallpox vaccination. And building off of what Nancy had discussed, while this is a very much of a local issue and we've had massive successes, a lot of that success is, if not driven by, it's in part a significant contributor is the fact that we have strong vaccination, pro-vaccination laws in place in order to coordinate access into significant public access to significant public goods. But the challenges that arose in that particular case, in the Jacobson case, I think in many ways are still resonating in our debate today. That particular case arose in the midst of an extended smallpox outbreak in the Boston area. Jacobson refused to comply with the Cambridge Board of Health regulation requiring all Cambridge residents to get either a vaccination or pay a $5 fine. The case ended up going to the U.S. Supreme Court, and while Jacobson was arguing his individual rights under the 14th Amendment and due process rights, meant that this law requiring him to take action was a violation. The case was decided in favor of Massachusetts law, requiring compliance with the smallpox vaccination law. And that law is important for a lot of different reasons. First and foremost, the broad power that the state does have at its disposal, the responsibility of the state under the police power to address issues of general health and welfare and safety. So this is very much a state-level concern. The court saw that there is a social compact, that while we do have individual rights, that we are parts of larger communities. Secondly, the court gave a great deal of deference to the legislature in determining how it wanted to structure and define what a public health concern was and the powers that could be used to address it. In this discussion today, as we're addressing issues of rumors, what this says for us who work in public health is how important it is to maintain communication and education with local legislatures, with local policymakers, because ultimately, as they have been highly supportive, they can also swing the other way, and they can move more towards buying into the myths or the arguments of those who are more skeptical. And so what we have seen is this play out in many states today, where we have seen expanding exemption processes or legislators continuing to parrot debunked safety concerns. As far as the impact on policy, in addition to seeing some expansions in a number of different states, we are seeing that people are taking up those exemptions. While they tend to be clustered, they are taking them up in larger rates than before. And we're seeing a great deal more of this hostility, and we're seeing a great deal more that the debate that is going on with regard to vaccines is modeling, unfortunately, a lot of the other debates that we're seeing through social media and the like. This is in part due to the way that people see themselves as aligning as part of communities. That these communities signal that they certain aspects of their identity. So how they view themselves as a good parent, meaning adhering to certain practices or behavior, whether that means vaccinating your dog would be a defiance of that sense of identity. And that we saw geographically and are starting to now see that in the space as far as how rumors not only pop up, but also continue to be sustained. Just as far as solutions are concerned, one just very briefly, I think one of the things that we need to look at in how the law is structured is as we go forward, I think we in the United States have a bulwark, unlike many other places around the world, such as Italy or the United Kingdom, because we do have this connection of vaccination requirements to other public goods. So maintaining those types of standards, and perhaps in certain other areas, assuring that in order to access certain types of benefits, that vaccination would occur. Is one way that we can use the law to counteract some of the myths and rumors. I think the other area is we have, as Mike Osterholm talked about earlier, the flu is, I think, one of the next big issues. And I think as we look at vaccination right now, it's not a requirement under most conditions for there to be vaccination. I think finding a policymaking process that can be participatory at the local level, and developing a process that can bring more frequent flu vaccination into wider populations. And I would argue now, as contrasted to when we have the multivalent vaccine in place, can be a way that we can be priming the pump first and foremost for new forms of vaccination policy, new forms of how to structure vaccination law, as well as preparing ourselves for potential epidemics in the future. So, thanks.